This is my new Laguna jointer. It's the JX8 with the ShearTech 2 cutter head, and I'm going to make 2 videos on it. This first video right now is going to be how to assemble it, and then the second video, which I'll release in about a week's time, is going to be how to tune it up and set it up so that you get nice flat square stock. Laguna doesn't send you any instructions with the machine. When you go on their website, they don't exist on the webpage for the JX8. I've brought that to Laguna's attention. They're going to try and fix that on their website. So subscribe to my channel, hit that notifications bell because you're not going to want to miss the next video for sure. Okay, so let's get to what's in the box. First off, like I say, the instructions, not part of what's in the box. So you do get a cover for the pulley belt on the back of the machine that runs the cutter head. There's 4 screws for it, so I'm going to assume that the only bag that has 4 screws are the ones that fit that. They also give you 5 extra carbide inserts for the cutter head and some of the actual screws to insert them or to fasten them to the cutter head. There's a couple of wrenches here as well with the Torx head to remove and reinstall them. What I don't know quite yet is if when you actually tighten down on these, if the handle gives way and allows the correct torque. The instruction manual, if you do actually go online to get it, it does tell you that you have to have each of the inserts torqued to between 52 and 60 inch-pounds of torque. So hopefully those wrenches come calibrated like that. I do have a wrench like this for a golf club head that actually does set the correct torque to the screw. So these look similar, so maybe that's how they are. You do get some box wrenches here. So there's an 8 and a 10 millimeter, as well as a 11 and 13, and a couple of hex Allen keys. You do get 3 bolts to fasten the jointer assembly to the stand base, and there's only 3. I thought that was a little bit odd, but there's 1 on the outfeed side, 2 on the infeed side. There's a couple of knobs that are going to lock the wheels in place on the base. You get the lift brackets, so there's 2 of them here. One of them is going to fasten onto the front right-hand corner and the other one onto the back left-hand corner in case you want to pick up the unit and move it around using a forklift. That's what you would use these for. I probably won't use these at all because it's going to stay put right here in my basement. You do get the control unit to turn the unit on and off, and that's wired right onto the base, so I can't move that around too much from where it is. And a pair of push blocks for safety, and then the cutter head guard. The one really cool thing is there is a roller on the infeed table, so if you do have a really long piece of stock, you can actually extend this out to give yourself a little bit of extra support on the infeed side. Not much else I can tell you just from a preliminary walk around. This particular lever adjusts the height of the outfeed table. It should be factory set, we're told in the instructions. There's a safety bar here that you can use to turn the unit off with your knee. One cool feature is there's this toe kick area where you can actually stand a little closer to the machine. Just makes things a little bit easier to actually guide the material through if you can get your foot down into that toe kick area. There's also a adjustment knob here to raise and lower the infeed table, and it gives you the depth of cut on the scale right here. I'll show you how to use that a little bit later on. And then there's also a locking pin right here. So we'll go through that a little bit later once we get this assembled. Lastly, as with every jointer, you do get a fence. I removed it in order to lighten the load a little bit in order to transport the jointer into my basement shop, but we'll reinstall that shortly. I think the first step is just getting some of the plastic off and getting rid of the oil that's on the surfaces here. A first glance at these tables tells me they're in really good shape. They're pretty flawless. I don't see any marks on them whatsoever. So in order to mount the jointer to the base, you've just got a bolt with a lock washer and a regular washer on it. Very, very standard kind of stuff. Very simple. And surprisingly, the jointer is not as heavy as I thought it might be. I'm just going to finger tighten this one up a little bit. Same on this end here. Just a bolt going through. The only place that you can actually put these little locks for the wheels on the base are actually on the infeed side of the table. The wheels are inside the cabinet so you don't see them, And these just simply screw in and make contact with the wheels so that they won't turn once you're actually using the machine in operation. And then on the outfeed side, there are some rubber feet that you can actually screw down, kind of like what's on a washing machine, to level it on the far end. And there actually is a nut on that too, so you can turn it with a wrench. I think the next easiest thing to install is probably going to be the control switches. The screws for these are actually already in the infeed table, along with a lock washer on it. And of course, they make these things too close to where the bend in the Allen key is actually going to be, so you can't actually use it to spin it in there fast. You're gonna have to spin it in by hand and then tighten it with the short end of that Allen key after. To put the belt on, hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. It's kind of a tough place to film, but there's 4 bolts that hold the motor for the jointer on, 2 on the top here, 2 under this bottom backside. Okay, so that allows the motor to actually slide up and down so you can tension the belt. And these belts are notched or grooved, so you do have to make sure you get them on the pulleys in the proper location. And I find that when tensioning a belt on a machine like this, often the weight of the motor itself is adequate to get the tension just right. So let's lift that up. Get the belt on there, let it drop down, and that overall belt tension looks pretty good. So let's fasten that in place right there just by tightening up these nuts. If you find that the belt tension's too loose when you turn the machine on and it's squealing or squeaking, then just loosen those 4 bolts off and just pull down on the motor before you start to tighten them, and that'll make sure you got some better tension on that belt. But it should have about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a 1/2 inch of deflection. The instruction manual says 1 inch, but there's no way you're going to get 1 inch of deflection on that. I think the next logical thing to assemble is going to be the guard that goes over the pulley above the cabinet and where the fence attaches. And they're just number 3 Phillips with a washer, not a lock washer, just a regular washer. Next, we'll replace the rear cover. The one surprising thing I noticed about these tables is there's actually quite a ridge or a lip in the manufacturing, and honestly it's going to scrape every single piece of wood that comes in contact with that. So I'm going to go around the perimeter of both beds and just file the edges, much like you would do to the bottom of a hand plane, to make sure that it doesn't leave tracks or kind of steer itself. So to do that a little bit easier, I'm just going to pop off of the control unit here. This side had quite a burr on it, but it comes off very easy. And then I'll reinstall the washer and the nylon nut that keeps the fence from coming off of the jointer. I'm just going to leave that loose enough that the washer and the bolt have a little bit of play, just so that you can actually move it forwards and backwards with very minimal effort. So hopefully you can see this in the video, but the one thing you do need to make sure that you connect before you actually put the jointer on is the safety switch for the knee bar on the front of the cabinet. So there's just a couple of tab connectors here, but make sure you connect those, and they come from the front of the cabinet. This guard is a little bit different than the one I had on my King jointer, and what I noticed about this one is if you let this pin drop all the way in, when you actually start to use the guard, it rubs on the table. So I am going to position this just so that it clears the table by about 1/8 of an inch or so right in here, so that it never rubs on the table and so that it won't scratch it all up in the long run. It does look like it has a slight angle to keep the far left side angled up off the table a little bit. There's a little more of a gap here than what there is on this right hand side, so I think it's kind of meant to not scratch the table over time. Okay, so let's give this a shot. Get our safety glasses on, hearing protection on, and we'll give her a go. Well, those test cuts were pretty disappointing because I discovered that we're actually making one side of the board thinner at a faster rate than the other. So we're getting a bit of a skewed cut or an unlevel cut. This joiner is not set up properly. This outfeed table is higher on this back right corner, and the infeed table is actually lower on that front left corner closest to the cutter head. So we're high here, low there. We're taking more material off of that side. Now, that's a problem because you're always going to get stock that ends up being leaned or slanted or tilted, and we don't want that. The whole point is to have a machine that can make things flat and square, and this isn't going to do it. Laguna says that this is shipped to you set up, but it is not. If it was, it is definitely moved during shipping. So you know what that means? It means another YouTube video next week on how to set this beast up properly so that we can get nice flat square stock. So make sure to subscribe to my channel, hit that notifications bell because you're not going to want to miss the next video. Until next time, go build something beautiful if you have a jointer that works.